Hi, my name is Dan Kalachi, and I'm a PhD student at the MIT Media Lab. In this video, I want to give you an overview of my paper, Organizing in the End of Employment: Information Sharing, Data Stewardship, and Digital Workerism. Now, this paper is a position paper. What that means is that its main contribution is really as a call to action. I argue that an important step for the CHI and CSCW communities is to develop worker-led research practices that help workers aggregate, access, and use the data they produce at work to build power. So let me convince you that worker-led research and digital tools will be important, and that data at work will be crucial to the future of the labor movement. So first, some context. We're in 2022. Algorithmic management, decentralized workforces, and on-demand labor models, think Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, etc., have deeply shifted the traditional employment relationship. Now, it used to be that if you're an employee, you have an employer, usually a single employer, and that relationship, that employee-employer relationship, gives you a whole host of benefits. And these important benefits are not just benefits you can get anywhere else in modern society. Things like health insurance, sick pay, overtime pay, support for maternity leave. These are things that are crucial to living a decent life, and the only way that we can access these is through this employment relationship. But that relationship is disappearing. This is because technology, combined with policy and legal incentives, are increasingly pushing firms to fissure these traditional employment relationships into independent contracting arrangements. Now, there are two main reasons for this. First, as long as firms are allowed to do this, they're incentivized to. Labor costs beyond wages, so some of those very same things I mentioned before: overtime laws, payroll taxes, liability costs, health insurance, these all effectively act as a tax on firms who opt to hire traditional employees. If you're not fissuring your workplace, you might be losing out on profits. Second, modern technology, much of it developed in the CSCW and CHI communities, makes automatic or augmented coordination of contract workers, even for some complex tasks like writing and editing, much more efficient and sometimes just feasible. This makes fissuring technically possible, even for complicated creative or knowledge work. What we know as platformed work today, things like ride sharing and delivery, or freelancing apps like Upwork, where workers are directed or nudged by an algorithm instead of a human manager, will spread into other areas of work. And these same technologies that manage workers in those contexts, algorithms, complex dispatching and delegation systems, those will be copied into other more complex fields. We don't see it yet, but the research that's in the CHI and CSCW communities, when expanded, will make it possible. These technologies have important implications for working conditions and worker power. Expanding fissured work controlled through algorithms and data also means expanding the surveillant workplace, which erodes privacy and agency. These conditions impact workers in several important ways. First, algorithmic or data-driven management can make understanding changes to working conditions difficult or impossible to understand for workers. In 2020, I worked with Workers for Shipt, Target's delivery company, to aggregate worker pay and audit a change that had been made to the workers' pay algorithm. They had moved from a transparent pay scheme to a new black box algorithm in the summer of 2020. Although Shipt claimed the new black box algorithm was fair, we found it may have cut over 40% of workers' pay, unannounced. Without access to transparent data like that, it can be impossible for workers to actually understand the working relationship they've agreed to. Second, increased surveillance, fissured work, and decentralized management limit worker power. Many of these systems limit the amount of information workers have about other workers doing the same work. Labor history tells a compelling story. about the importance of information sharing in successful organizing campaigns. One of the first steps in most successful organizing work is to map out an organization and understand the desires, limits, and needs of the working population. If you can't do that simple step because your workforce is disaggregated or because there's no centralized management system, it's hard to start building worker power in the first place. Third, the information that workers produce at work. So in the rideshare case, location data, working patterns, the speed of trips and deliveries and locations of them is valuable. Firms like Uber and Lyft not only use data about worker behavior to create better products, like improving their algorithm, but they also use it to engage in what some scholars call dual value production, trading in the speculative value of the data they extract from workers to produce profit. This increases the value that workers provide to the firm, but workers often see little benefit. So, how can access to data and building tools help, and how do we get there? So first, researchers can build accessible tools to help workers document and understand their own working conditions. There are tools like WeClock, an app that I help work on, which expands the purview of data that workers and organizers can collect by turning mobile phones into digital sensors. And tools like this can help workers counter the digital measurement done by firms, or just do inquiry and research into working conditions more generally. More tools like WeClock, along with low or no-code data analysis tools that make understanding such data more accessible, can be considered active areas of HCI research. Second, researchers can also participate in co-research with workers, offering their skills and expertise to worker movements seeking to counter algorithmic management or just understand their working conditions. Because data analysis and collection is so difficult and requires technical skill, academic partnerships with worker-led research agendas will be really important to build more digital capacity in the labor movement. Third, rather than simply fighting the findings of algorithmic management, researchers can zoom in on how to design democratic and participatory, value-sensitive algorithms. Participatory alternatives to modern algorithmic management systems could help workers have a stronger voice in workplaces across fields and into the future. Finally, CHI and CSCW researchers can build and test new technologies that enable alternative workplace and data governance arrangements. Despite recent news, union density is still extremely low in the United States. Connecting new ways of creating accountable organizations and governing data use with worker collectives could be an important way to bolster the labor movement in the future. In our modern economy, whose ailments like massive inequality, poor working conditions, and little autonomy for many workers, especially low-wage workers, have been pegged to the past century's precipitous decrease in labor power, building tools and systems that use data to help workers organize might also just construct a more sustainable future and fight income inequality. Overall, CHI and CSCW researchers have a myriad of ways they can contribute to the modern labor movement and to help build digital capacity for workers everywhere. Thanks for watching this video. You can read the full paper off my website or in the 2022 proceedings, and you can reach me at dkalachi@media.mit.edu. Thank you very much.